Hi, welcome. It is Friday, and this is the Parent Exchange, and my name is Tilly Elvrum, and I am an administrator here at Parent Support for Online Learning. And today I have a special guest and a friend, a dear friend in advocacy and parenting. My friend here is Ty Babinski, and he lives in Wisconsin. And Ty has been a really wonderful champion for Wisconsin families over the years and has led the Wisconsin Coalition of Virtual School Families as their board president. And so welcome, Ty. I'm glad you're here.
Hi, Tilly.
He's laughing because we just talked for like half an hour before we started catching up, which is wonderful. And Ty, we've, been partners in advocacy over the years. And for the years that I was with the National Coalition for Public School Options, you were leading the way in Wisconsin and, mentoring families there and leading advocacy efforts there. And I just always appreciated Ty because he's very hands-on advocate. He's also very straightforward. And if there's a problem and parents' school choice is being undermined, he's always there and he's got something to say. And he's a fighter for families. So I really wanted to have him here to talk a little bit from the dad perspective about school choice and parenting and school reopenings and all of these things, because this group is about 90% female, a lot of moms in this group, and I really wanted to have the dad voice have a little spotlight here in the group. So Ty, tell us a little bit about your family and your kids and how you kind of fell into school choice advocacy.
Sure. So I have 4 kids. Rose is our youngest. She's 3. Charlotte will be 7 next week. And then my 2 boys, Jonathan and Tyler, they're 14 and 12. And so I kind of started off in the virtual school world when my oldest son, Jonathan, was entering kindergarten. We had wanted to do some form of homeschooling, but when it came down to Jonathan starting school, I was I ended up being the stay-at-home dad. So through different circumstances, my wife's a registered nurse and she had a good job. And so when it was time to school Jonathan, I kind of needed some support. I'm good with teaching things and very hands-on with the kids, and but to put together curriculum and all those type of things to make sure I covered all my bases, we found a virtual school here in Wisconsin. Didn't know really the struggles that they had gone through in our state to get online virtual schools going, and to not have, enrollment caps that were just arbitrary numbers, and open enrollment was in the middle of February. And we were watching TV the one day in January and saw a commercial for a full-time online virtual school. And so we signed up. So it was that following year that we had our Capital Days. The Wisconsin Coalition of Virtual School Families got an email from my school, said, hey, come down to Madison, a bunch of other virtual school families. I thought, man, sounded great. We had just been in Wisconsin for a couple years. So my wife's from here, but I had never been to the Capitol. And so my mom actually was with us, and my mom and myself and my 2 boys, we went down to Madison. And when we were there, I heard the whole story of kind of where school choice advocacy came from in Wisconsin and the struggles and this lawsuit and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, I need to get involved with this. I also didn't realize how fortunate we were, because our school at the time had enrollment caps, and we were fortunate to be accepted into the school. So fast forward to current day, my oldest, Jonathan, is a freshman this year, which is crazy to say. I don't feel like I should have a freshman yet, but he's definitely a teenager, and he looks at me eye to eye now. He's like an inch shorter than me. So a far cry different from that little curly-headed boy that I started schooling, so many years ago. And so Jonathan's a freshman. Tyler will be going into 7th grade, and then Charlotte is going into 3rd grade. We did an online virtual school this last year with all 3 kids the last few years. And now I am back to work full time. I have been for a few years now. And so my wife primarily does the schooling, and she was traditionally homeschooled growing up. And so we're kind of switching back to traditional homeschooling, just all books and curriculum that we put together. But we are going to continue Jonathan in an online Spanish class. He really enjoyed that this last year. And I think this will probably be the last year where we just do math at home. We're definitely going to need some support, and we really value our teachers in the virtual schools. And we have a lot of options in the state where you can take just a couple classes if you need that support as a parent. And so that's kind of how things started. We just signed up for a virtual school. Then I heard about advocacy, got involved, continued to school our kids. And so here we are today.
Amazing. And I think you speak to the real reasons that families need options.
Absolutely.
Life circumstances, employment changes. I think a lot of families are experiencing that right now with
For sure.
COVID and the economy. And then just understanding that your kids' needs change.
Right.
And, what might be a good fit for one family may not be the right option for another, but we need all those options.
Yeah.
And you're right, Wisconsin is a lot like Colorado. We both have a lot of options. You have 40-some online programs in Wisconsin. Colorado has over 60. And that makes it a little easier for us to be able
Sure.
to choose the online option and the right one, because even within the online model, there's diversity in the options. So does that mean that in Wisconsin, the funding, because it sounds like you can kind of do some course access stuff
Sure.
and take chunk of money and access just what you need.
So how I always think in my head, I usually do the long explanation, and I think, how can I say this concisely, which I'm very bad at. But so the law finally changed a couple of years ago in Wisconsin. To me, it mirrors what I knew families in Iowa could do for the longest time, and that was a traditionally homeschooled kid can access as much or little of the local public school that they want to. And so it's not the same for kids that are open enrolled into a virtual school. There's still kind of some hurdles with that. But with the way that the laws changed, as like with us just doing books, traditional homeschooling this year, we can access a few courses with the online schools as well. And so that's kind of the support that we're looking at. It's fortunate for families that, boy, how do I say this? Sometimes it's hard to pay for schooling for your kids. And that's the beauty of the online virtual schools, is you're already paying your taxes, and you talk about funding and that with the kids. If you don't have that option to just say, well, I'll just pay for this course or that, being able to access your public school or access a virtual school kind of a la carte is really a good thing. And that's where it's student focused. And, so many times in education, we hear about funding and the teachers unions and the local public school and all this stuff that gets convoluted, which is a part of the puzzle. We value our local schools. We have really great public schools in our area. However, sometimes I think the student gets lost in that, and the student doesn't, as we've talked in advocacy for years, it'd be great if that student had their funding backpack and it just followed them along where they were going. And, you can't completely turn the Titanic in one, move, because we've got a system set up that, works for a lot of kids, but for those that the regular traditional brick and mortar school doesn't work, having all those virtual options or, options at your local school are things that are really important.
Yeah, you're really blessed because, I talk to, parents here in Colorado, and they're like, I really like, homeschooling, or I really like my traditional brick and mortar school or my virtual school, but I know this other school offers this one
Right.
course,
Right.
or maybe it's a sport or band or whatever,
Right.
and their kids don't have access to it and they
Right.
don't understand. And I'm like, well, it all goes back to the money. It all goes
Yep.
back to that funding mechanism.
Yep.
And unfortunately, in Colorado, we have not figured it out how
Right.
to unbundle that funding mechanism and really give, families a menu of options where they could
Sure.
choose some things a la carte that might meet the individual needs of their kids.
Well, it requires a mindset change or a focus change, in education, and that's what we're out here, I say pounding the pavement, but pounding the internet, to say kids need options, kids need choices, and I mean, there's some places in this country where kids don't even have any virtual school option in some states. It's either go to your local brick and mortar school where you happen to be born in that zip code, or where your parents happen to have work, and good luck getting something. And for a lot of kids that it works fine, but there really are so many kids that need those options, and the world is changing. If anything, with all this virus stuff that's happened in the last 6 months or however long, I don't know, it seems like 6 years, but
Forever.
the eternity of the COVID haze has shown us that society can function different. People can work from home, people can do different things. And so why don't we, as advocates and as a society, look and say, well, then maybe we can do education differently. And I can't tell you how many professionals and so many different things that have always had to go to the office and be there, and their companies are finding out that things can be more streamlined, and that actually accountability, you'd think maybe accountability would be less in the home, but I know some my friends that work in the IT world, and they said, there were those couple people that just kind of skated along because they were at the office, but when they're home, their productivity is like, here it is. And I would love to see that transition into schooling for children, to show that we can do things differently and we can be really good at it, and kids can really succeed. The world is virtual, everything is online, everything is I mean, you and I are 1,000 some miles away, and here we are talking and having a discussion, and then it's going to go out to the interweb forever.
Yeah.
And kids need those kind of options with their schooling, and we've made some good progress, but there's still more work to be done.
Yeah, I think I know my hope is that this is going to be the disruption that
Right.
really fundamentally changes the system.
Sure.
And I think
Sure.
it does go back to what you were saying about a change in mindset.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the changes in mindset, let's talk about it a little bit, is as parents all across the country, because everybody became a homeschooler.
Yeah.
Or
welcome to our world.
right, or a virtual learner. Their eyes are really being open to what education is,
Sure.
what's really happening with their kids.
Right.
They're really figuring out what the curriculum is like, what the teachers are saying in class, and
what's your day, what your day is being spent doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know when school shut down in March, I mean, your circle of friends, your neighborhood, the parents that you're talking to, how did that go? I mean, what were
in our community, so we actually have quite a few friends or families that we're friends with that have a lot of kids, like 6 to 8, 9, 10 kids. And
wow.
A lot of those, we have like multiple families. And each one of them, it's really unique. They each do their schooling different, and most of them have a blend. In fact, one of the families that I know, their oldest two are really into basketball and sports. And so they kind of did traditional homeschooling for a while, but they were at the traditional brick and mortar school. And then they had their middle kids kind of in the virtual school. And then their youngest, once you've schooled your kids enough, they've got 6 kids. Once the mom was on her 6th kid, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade is really, pretty simple for them.
Yeah.
But some of those families that had all their kids in different places, now all the kids were in one place. And most of those families that had some experience with the virtual world and with traditional homeschooling, COVID was just a blip on the radar. It was kind of that way for us. Our schedule just stayed the same. But I have a lot of other families that we're good friends with as well, that all of a sudden their kids were home and, you know, they were engaged with their kids and very much a part of their kids' life, but hadn't had to take on the teacher role. And a lot of what I saw in the state, and we had some schools that did a decent job, but a lot of them, it was like kind of voluntary class. And if you just turned something in, you got credit.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard a lot of parents express their frustration with the fact that they feel like, you know, especially for kids that were seniors, the last 2 to 3 months of their school was, they didn't learn anything. They didn't get anything. And we've had all these virtual schools for the longest time, and nobody was asking these people. And then I would hear some parents say, oh, well, yeah, see, this virtual schooling is a joke. And I'm like, no, the cobbled together local district trying. And I felt for those teachers. I know ladies that are school teachers, and they're like, I don't know what to do in this environment. My kids aren't in front of me. They were as lost as the kids were. And so these school districts were just trying to kind of throw something together, as to where the virtual world, you know, the virtual schools that we know, their kids got as good or better, you know, they've got the same quality of education that virtual schooling provides. And those, you know, those kids really, you know, they learned for a few more months. And I just heard so many parents very dissatisfied with their local school district. And I know a few teachers that have transitioned over the years. We've had many different teachers, and most of them, we had one year, the lady, she emails and said, okay, I'm your new teacher for this year, and this is my first year with such and such virtual school. And I could tell there was she was nervous, you know, and I said, don't worry about it. We're one of those families. We've done this for a while. And I could hear that when we were on a phone call, I could hear her voice. She's like, oh, phew, that's somebody I don't have to worry about. And I was actually a resource as a parent a few times for those teachers that were coming into the virtual world. But it really takes a while to get used to it and to understand the model. And, you know, a lot of times I always liken virtual school teachers as more like kind of curriculum managers and like education managers, as to opposed to in front of students 8 hours teaching them things. And so it's a different model. It's a very successful model. I can tell you kid after kid after kid after kid from virtual schools that have graduated. A lot of them have college credits already by the time that they're graduating high school, because they've dual enrolled with the local technical college or been able to work on, you know, getting those credits. And, you know, virtual education really is an asset and something that kids can really succeed at. But what we experienced with the COVID shutdowns and the local school districts trying their best to jump into a world that they were completely lost, there were just a lot of parents that were dissatisfied with that. And I mentioned to you earlier when we were talking that even our local school district in our area here has launched a virtual school. Instead of just having their in-person teachers kind of throw something together, they're allowing families to say, okay, well, we're just going to do virtual school this year. And I'm excited to see what they've come up with. I'm hoping that they've reached out to the resources in our state of the experienced online educators. And, you know, hopefully that really provides a good solution for a lot of families in our little corner of Wisconsin here.
Yeah, I hope so. You've really hit on a lot of my concerns.
Sure.
You know, nobody faults the traditional system.
No, absolutely not.
For the not being able to scale up full-time online learning in the first couple weeks of a pandemic.
Right.
Faults them for that at all. But you really speak to, you know, when you said that you were a resource for this new educator, that's really what I've seen. School reopening task forces all across the country, and the lack of expertise from full-time online parents and full-time online practitioners, it's appalling, frankly.
Right. Well, how many times are parents, the just traditional parents, just regular old parents, not educators, not nothing, but how often are we involved in the decision making that affects our children? We're not. Generally, we're put to the sideline. You know, when all the stuff in Washington, the No Child Left Behind got eliminated, and then they passed the ESSA and Every Student Succeeds Act, and they're like, all right, the states need to come up with their new education standards. I heard of like 1 or 2 states where they had some families where they actually had parents at the table, and the rest of them are like, nope, we're good. We'll just come up with our own thing and not figure out what's best for your kids. We'll just tell you what's best for them.
Yeah, and that's what's aggravating. I mean, if we're going to talk about politics,
oh boy.
Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, they had these unity task forces under, a couple different issues. One was education.
Right.
And if you look who makes that up, it's all teachers union, education establishment, status quo.
Right.
And my problem is here we are where the whole nation has shifted to online learning. We are in digital spaces, and there was not one person on this task force that had any experience, meaningful experience, offering full-time online education for K through 12 or higher ed.
Right.
And I was just like, what are we doing here? And it goes, we are in a crisis. This is a crisis, and we are not in a crisis mentality. I know if, I am sick, I'm calling the specialist.
Right.
I'm not going to call, maybe just, somebody who took first aid at the Y.
Right.
To deal with my diagnosis. I want the specialist to come in there, and we're not treating what's happening in education right now as the crisis that it is. And, I know you're equally as frustrated on that because, we've lived it. We understand what families need in an online environment. And we could inform that. And it's not just because we just want to be at the table. We want to make this a better experience for all the families coming up behind us.
I've had dozens of families reach out to me, people I've been friends with for a long time. And I'm just constantly getting Facebook messages, and we have large group that we do like a Wednesday night church activity throughout the school year. And so I know tons of kids, and I'm invested in these kids. I know their names. I know what they like to do. We have a good time. We play games and do all this great stuff. And now all of a sudden, all their parents are like, hey, you do that virtual school stuff, right? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh man, last spring was horrible. I'm like, yeah, I know. They're like, you got any suggestions? I'm like, well, how long you got, And once again, trying to type concisely is even harder than me trying to speak concisely, because I could just, anyways. So we've been able to guide a lot of families and kind of give them, help them understand what their options are, in education. And so, but, if I was part of some task force or some, even maybe more on like the school district level, if they reached out to parents that are experienced, you could really, you could help hundreds or thousands of kids instead of, I'm happy to help the dozens of, families that I know personally. But gosh, you would just think that people that say that education is so important would just, like we talked about earlier, all hands on deck, trying to, treat this as a crisis. And you don't want to just go into a fight with a tiny weapon, or just with a, you're like, all right, well, I'm going to go attack Russia with a stick. We're whatever politically. You want to go out there with all the resources that you have. And so if we view this as a battle, that we're in a battle for our kids' education, and education is what lifts you out of poverty. Education is what gives you options. Education is what, gives you options in life for jobs and for just so many things. It's really, I think, one of the foundations of our society is that children have the options in education. but so many people just treat it as, well, let's just do whatever. And, hey, let's just kind of get through this school year till this COVID stuff goes away. Well, what if the world, what if things don't go back to whatever status quo, and should they, education wise, even if there wasn't a pandemic? I would say no. I mean, we've been fighting for this. You've been advocating longer than I have. And we've seen a lot of successes, but there's so much more work to be done. And as you said, the pandemic really has put a spotlight on, there's some stuff that needs to change with education.
Yeah, it really does. And I've actually seen people say, it's all right. It's a year.
Right.
And our babies are only young once. And, every year for education, particularly for our most vulnerable students.
Right.
Every year that they lose a meaningful education,
right,
it will have a profound effect on their lives.
Right.
And how do you feel about school reopenings now? Do you think they're prepared and remote learning will be different than it was in the spring?
It's kind of hard to gauge. I was telling you earlier, I don't pay attention to that much stuff that goes on in the entire state. There's just too many things happening. So in Western Wisconsin, like I said, we have some really good school districts, and that, boy, I lost my train of thought. That happened. I'm surprised that's the first time this happened in this conversation.
So how do you feel about remote learning? Is it going to be better than the spring?
Okay, so yeah, the remote learning. So in our area, I think I mentioned that earlier, that they've started a virtual school for our local school districts in the area, in the La Crosse area. Okay, there we go. Now I remembered what I was going to say. So in our area, COVID really hasn't been terrible. In a county of 100,000 people, we've had just about 1,000 cases, not really any more than 100 and some active at one time. So it's not something you want to happen. I know quite a few people personally that have been sick, and luckily they've all recovered and been fine. And my sister-in-law even had it, and we're super close with them. But in our area, they had the health department had this whatever compass that was supposed to tell us where our risk and assessment and all this stuff was at. And so then some problems came out with that compass. We were in severe risk. So all the school districts, they were making their choices within the last couple of weeks. And they said, well, that's it. We can't have in-person class. And there's been all this, whatever, up and down about they changed metrics and there was misreporting and yada, yada, yada. And so school districts, I know quite a few of them in the area are smaller schools that were actually planning on opening in September, but they're looking to wait a month. And so in response to that, they started the virtual school for the area here. And I know quite a few people have signed up for it, but it looks like we're going to be virtual in our area, at least for the first month. I don't know what's going to magically change October 20th or whatever that's going to allow them. But I know some other people, actually my neighbor's a teacher, and she expressed her frustration with trying to provide an education because very little guidance from the district, from the superintendent, like here's ways to succeed. If they talked to the neighbor that's the virtual school parent, I could have given them some tips. Yeah. Or all the other online educators. But so I think they've prepared over the summer as best as they can. But I would, if I had to guess, and I don't want to throw teachers under the bus or anything, but without really seeing any effort in the state for any of the school districts reaching out to virtual school partners in education, I would say it would be better than this spring because I'm an optimist, but I would say it's probably not going to be the level of education that those children are used to getting. And I think a lot of those kids would really be better off in our full-time online virtual schools. And I know a lot of families have made that switch, but so that's kind of where I see education in our state. It's, I don't know much about in the bigger school districts. I know for sure they were all planning online, but there was talk in our area of some of the smaller school districts opening, and they've all just made the decision to wait. So that's kind of my gauge on things.
Yeah. I think that's pretty similar to what we've heard across the country.
Right.
And no, I mean, I think teachers are in an untenable position,
Yeah.
and
It makes me upset for the teacher. You know, I've
yeah,
advocated for kids for the longest time, that kids need these, but dang it, these teachers need support. My sister's a special education teacher down in Georgia, and oh, we'll leave that at that.
yeah,
She would not have the support that she needs to, especially special education. I know some families, we have a family down the road that has a daughter with Down syndrome, and all of her programs, all of her in-person stuff was canceled this spring. She got no support for anything, and her parents are awesome, and they do a really great job with their daughter, you know, and she's well loved and awesome. But those things that she needed for learning and for developing, and that those things were, you know, all that stuff was canceled. And so we've got to come up with better ideas, you know, to help support, you know, not just like you said, our at-risk students. An at-risk student, you know, somebody that's a couple grade levels behind, if they lose 4th grade or 5th grade, oh gosh, you know, that's just, you want to talk about putting them in a hole. That's, you know,
yeah,
their education. That's just the way it is.
and it goes back to what you were saying. The teachers would be in a better position, the schools would be in a better position
Yeah.
had they leaned on, you know,
Right.
the 40-some virtual programs in Wisconsin, and
Right.
all of those teachers that had the experience,
Right.
and that they, you know, they had the investment of professional development, you know.
Right.
They were
And I would
teaching,
hope to see
yeah,
some success stories with that. And maybe there has been. I haven't heard about it. I know a few head of schools, you know, in some of our larger schools in the state, and maybe I could reach out to them and see. I'd be interested. I would hope that there's been some reaching out, but definitely nothing on a grand level. You know, nothing on a all hands on deck. Our state superintendent's, you know, partnering with the virtual schools, and we're gonna lead the way, and we're gonna do better. You know,
yeah.
I haven't seen.
I've heard a lot of teachers who did a lot of professional development on their own.
Oh,
Over the summer, they tried to kind of figure things out on their
sure.
own.
Right.
But
How many times do teachers have to do that, right?
right.
They got to buy supplies. They got to go out and
Yeah,
search. These are people that actually care about our kids and educating them. They don't get support from their
yeah.
districts.
Well, and I mean, I'm here, like, you know, a lot of schools start school on Monday,
Right.
and their PD from their schools on the new systems that the schools have adopted since the spring, it started last week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you telling me that teacher's going to be confident and proficient
Right.
in a week? That's,
Right.
to me, that's, I don't know, just file it on how to not deliver virtual
Yeah.
education. That's not
Right.
setting your teachers up for success, and it
Right.
surely isn't setting your families and your
Right.
students up for success. So
Well, it's like my work that I did today. I installed a backsplash for like, I do flooring and tile work and that. And so I was installing a backsplash. Boy, she would have loved it if I showed up to her $500,000 cabin and be like, oh, well, I just figured out this. They gave me a trowel and some glue, and I just started last week.
yeah, you're my practice house. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I hope this goes well.
Yeah, no. So I try to be optimistic.
Right.
And definitely in the spring, I thought, you know, and I was one of these people that said, you know what, let everybody take a deep breath for a couple weeks, school's closed, take a deep breath, and then come back in June, and you guys just like, that didn't happen. No, we're a couple, you know, days out, and teachers are just now getting their, you know, their formal professional development from their schools. So I'm worried.
I think that should not be called professional development.
I don't crash course.
Yeah, I think that's the wrong name for preparing something a few days ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, I know my college student prepares more for things than that. So I'm a little worried. But you know, that's the whole reason that this group was formed, is, you know, parents like you We knew that it was going to be a difficult transition for
Right.
our fellow parents who, you know, weren't used to online learning and didn't choose it. They kind of got forced into it.
Right.
And so we wanted to be a resource. And so, but you've been the learning coach in your family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a dad, which is, you know, like in our family, you know, I kind of did the bulk of the learning coach duties, but I would save some things to do with my husband.
Right.
One, to include him in our son's education, but also because he has expertise in areas that I don't. And
Right.
so that was nice. But talk a little bit about, I don't know, the dad role as a learning coach and how that works in your house.
Sure. So I've always been really hands-on with my kids. You know, I came from a divorced home growing up, and those things happen. And, you know, we have a lot of kids in, you know, different family situations. But something that was always important to me that I missed out on as a kid is I wasn't very close with my dad growing up. I am now. We have a great relationship. And of course, my mom and I have always been close. So I've always been really hands-on with my kids. I try not to be the helicopter parent. Now, after 4 kids, Rosie, I mean, I'm glad that she's alive and breathing, and if she eats dinner off the floor, you know, whatever. So starting off as a learning coach, my oldest, Jonathan, book smart wise of all 4 kids, he's like off the charts. So like, I mean, he was already reading for a couple years before we started school. And so schooling him was pretty easy, except for concepts that he didn't know. I thought I was a failure. A week and a half into virtual schooling, I had to teach my brilliant son, who could read and spell and all this stuff. I had to teach him to count by 2s. And that took us a week and a half. And I thought, oh boy, here's the learning coach dad. Here's how to not do this, you know. And it was just, I had to learn that when he knew something, which was most things, he didn't have to work hard to learn it. But when he didn't know something, it was very difficult to cram it into that brain. And so thinking I was prepared, 2 years later, Tyler starts learning, and I had already done 1st grade with Jonathan. So great. I'm doing completely different way of learning, completely different personality, not as strong of a reader, but super driven and focused, you know. And then fast forward even farther, going, you know, my wife and I sharing different duties over the years. And we've always kind of, with my wife being a nurse, and then, you know, with me, I'm technically self-employed, you know, I'm an independent contractor. We've set our schedule where one of us is always home with the kids. So it would kind of be like, tag, you're going to work, I'm home, and here's what I've done, and here's what you've done, and what, you know. So with Charlotte being a daughter, as a dad, I would always give my wife a hard time with the boys when they were younger. She's like, oh, take it easy on them. And I'm like, no, I need to. Well, then my daughter comes around, and not wanting to be harsh with my daughter because she cries. And then as a dad, you can't take that when your daughters cry at you.
Such a softie.
Yeah. And so she learns a completely different way. She's very hands-on. She would actually live outside if I let her. She has a treehouse, and the day I put it up, she said, well, I can sleep in there tonight, right? I'm like, no, honey, it's like 50 degrees out right now. You can't. She taught herself to ride her bike this summer. She just like, Dad, I need my training wheels off. 2 weeks ago, her girlfriends were roller skating. So we got her roller skates. She roller skates up and down the road now. I didn't have to teach anything. So with her, it's funny because it's almost, you know, like boys are usually rambunctious and don't want to sit down. Well, Charlotte's she's super active. So with her, the challenge is to get her excited to learn about learning. And we did the online virtual school with her the last 2 years, and having a teacher there that she had a relationship with and would kind of encourage her was definitely something that helped us in her learning. And so those are kind of I have so many, I mean, I could talk for hours about the different things we've done, but as a learning coach, as a dad, it helped that I always was kind of hands-on with my kids. I really know them well. I'm thankful that my oldest is going to be 15 here soon. we still are super close. He talks to me about everything. You know, I'm very close with my kids. And so having that relationship, I would say virtual schooling actually really reinforced that relationship. And maybe a parent that's new to this whole thing, mom or a dad, you know, maybe they're used to their kid being at the school for 8-9 hours a day. And now all of a sudden they're home, and maybe this school they're doing virtual schooling, and you're nervous about it. And man, what am I going to do? You know, it gives you extra time with your kids. And for us, it's been rare that we've had to have an 8 or 9 hour school day. Generally, we can get our work done in less time than that. And so it gives you more time to reinforce those relationships. And then that relationship with your child helps reinforce the education. So they go together. And, you know, the virtual learning, I think, really is a asset or a help to being close with your child. And then being close with your child is then an asset to the virtual education, you know, or traditional homeschooling or blended learning or whatever it is. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's beautiful, the relationship you have with your kids, and that you were able to be a part of their day-to-day education. I know I've always said that it was a blessing for our family, and I really believe that it allowed us to be closer as a family. And you know, we were military before, and then my husband's job, he traveled a lot. And when we decided that we were going to do online, you know, where we might only see him maybe on the weekends, pretty soon we were like, well, he's got a trip, you know, we're going to go with him. And so we would do school in a library or a hotel room or wherever we had Wi-Fi. And then he'd go off to work. And then every night we, you know, we were having dinner in the hotel or whatever. We were together. And so that, as a military family that lost a lot of time together, that was precious to us.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't get that time back.
No, you don't get it back. And so, and I have heard from many families during remote learning, it's stressful and it hasn't been perfect, but what they have appreciated is that life slowed down. Because they weren't running to, you know, 3 soccer games and getting one kid to basketball and another kid to, you know, some other extracurricular. Life slowed down, and so they're having meals together and just getting some of that quality time back. And so,
well, and I paint a rosy picture, you know, because as my wife calls me, I'm an incurable optimist. But for as many of those great days that we had, just an encouragement to parents out there, you know, you're in this group and watching the video and you're like, man, boy, they just had sunshine and roses for all those years of all their education. I had days I wanted to rip my hair out. I had days where we're like, you know what, that's it. We tried this for 45 minutes today and you bozos aren't listening. So we're done. We're going to clean. You're going to do this. And like you said, though, it's time together, and time together is always a good thing. And, you know, one of the things that we've always tried as a family is to give our kids opportunities to succeed, but also give them opportunities to fail with us there for guidance. And I found that the older my kids have gotten, you know, you have to, I'm not a helicopter parent. I don't want my children to grow up and live in my basement. I want them to get an education and go out and be successful and provide for themselves and a family and that. But giving them opportunities for independence and opportunities to learn things and an opportunity to fail with me there for guidance, you know, that's another asset that you have. And those are times that you get when you school at home. You get good days, you get great days, then you get those really bad days, and you learn as a parent, and it gives your children an opportunity to learn as well. That, you know what, sometimes we can fail at something, and then we dust ourselves off and we get up, try again the next day, and we put effort into it, And as a family, we stick together, we love one another and support each other and move forward. And, like I said, this Jonathan, he's being ninth grade. So it's his 10th year of schooling. And I go back to that first week in the virtual school, not being able to teach him how to count by twos. And now he programs computers and he's just, man, it's been a journey, and there's been some missteps. He's had some learning difficulties sometimes with, he doesn't focus like his father. You're trying to concentrate on, shiny light, and so we've been able to work through those issues with him and get him the flexibility he needs on days. We had a couple years ago where he just was just really struggling. And we were doing a virtual school at that time, but our virtual school had completely changed, and there was all these like deadlines and all, because they were dealing with truancy problems with a bunch of families. And all of a sudden the flexibility that we enjoyed was gone. And we had to pull him out of the virtual school the rest of that school year and traditionally school him at home and work through those issues. And I could imagine what the nightmare would have been if he would have been at a school and with maybe teachers that weren't set up to help him with that. Because he wasn't under an IEP or anything like that. And we were able to work through that as a family, and, he made it through that. And so that was really hard. We had a couple weeks that winter, he didn't do any school because he just was struggling so bad with some emotional issues, and, and all kids go through stuff like that. Yeah. And so we were able to support him as a family and catch up on that education. And he's going to launch a rocket to the moon or something. I don't know. He's a brilliant kid. But all of this education doesn't come without its struggles, and you just work through those things.
Yeah. It's hard work to learn to do school at home, no matter if it's traditional homeschooling or through a virtual school, or if you're one of these families doing remote learning, like you said, it's okay. It's hard. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not, but it's an investment in your children. And
worthwhile investment.
It's the best investment you can make. So we're almost out of time here, but
can't imagine I kept talking.
Tell me, you and I, we could talk forever.
Right.
But tell me a little bit about the Wisconsin Coalition of Virtual School Families, and what new things you have going on with the group.
All right. So my quick spiel about our Wisconsin Coalition. So we've had online schools in the state for close to 15 years. What got me involved in advocacy was a couple years before I advocated. Our largest virtual school in the state got sued to be shut down by the teachers union. We got representation. Families came together. Some really dear friends of mine that I'm dear friends with now fought the battles before I was even around to open that school back up. It was just closed in like March or April of the school year. And these few hundred kids that were used to this virtual school, their school was shut down. Anyways, got representation. They allowed the virtual school to continue with all these arbitrary caps and all this stuff. Fast forward, enrollment caps were lifted. Open enrollment was expanded to year round. There's all kinds of different virtual schools in the state. And what started as advocacy group for virtual learning has turned into us advocating for school choice for kids, that they should be able to choose a school that works best for them, whether that's through a voucher program. There's a very successful school voucher program in the Milwaukee area where there's some schools that really struggle, and kids that are born into that zip code don't have options, and the voucher program allows them to go to charter schools or others. And so that's the short story of our coalition. I've been involved since 2013. I've been the board president for a few years now. And so we fought a lot of battles, and we won a lot of battles, and we expanded school choice in the state, and thousands it's mainstream now. There's thousands upon thousands of kids at virtual school full-time in our state. Are very successful, do a good job. But something that we saw as an opportunity as a coalition over the summer here is to launch a website. I don't know if you can pull that up, Tilly.
There
we go.
It is right there.
Hey, look at us old parents doing some technology here.
Very fancy, right?
Yeah. I call myself, never mind. I was going to tell a joke, but I'll just, anyway, so it's transfertovirtualschool.com. And this is just a very simple website to guide Wisconsin families that are been frustrated with the cobbled together virtual learning thing that happened this last spring because of the pandemic. I don't fault schools for that, but I do have a problem when children don't have the access to an education that's going to help them the best. So this kind of puts you through step-by-step how to enroll in a full-time online virtual school in the state of Wisconsin. Open enrollment is year-round, and so can be some hurdles with that. There's a 800 number to call if people have questions, and one of us board members will return that phone call, and talk to them and guide them through things. I was telling you that I could, that I've reached out to dozens of families, or dozens of families have reached out to me personally, but those are just within my circle, and maybe there's lots of other families in our state that just are kind of lost. And so we launched this website to help those families. There is a process in Wisconsin where you seek to open enroll, and your local superintendent can then veto your open enrollment, but then you can challenge that process. And so we as a coalition have experience with that. It's kind of more of a formality than anything else. And so if there are families that are being denied access to school choice for their kids, we want to help with that as a coalition. We want to get those kids the option that the parent chooses is the best thing for that kid. And that's where education, that's where it's never the wrong choice, is when you empower parents to make the best school education choice for their kid. And as a coalition, we want to help support families that are making the choice to do something that they know is best for their child.
Absolutely. Well, we'll share the link to this page in the comments of this video when we.
Oh, I feel like a YouTuber now. Check the comments for the.
We're so fancy here, right?
Yeah, well, you're fancy. I'm just in, the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin, talking on my cell phone.
Well, we appreciate you spending time with us, and you really offered some great perspective and encouragement to families who are getting ready for another season of remote learning. And we hope that it's much improved. But if they're struggling, and if it's a really bad day, call Ty.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anybody, I'll put that invitation out there. If I don't know you and you're in this support group, and something I said, kind of resonated with you, or you just have some questions, I'm always a Facebook message or, email or phone call or way or whatever. If you want to reach out to me through the group, or even, be like, hey, there was that guy on that video, Tilly, who was that? I'm always willing to talk with anybody. Even when I'm working, I don't make too much noise, and I have Bluetooth headphones. So I've actually had many a conversation while I'm troweling mud and sticking tiles. And, if I can do anything to help another family make the best choice in education for their child, or can just help them make some choices, I'm always willing to do that.
Well, and that you really do have a heart of an advocate, and we appreciate you so much. And thank you for spending some time with us and catching up. And I wish you and your beautiful family all the best for the new school year. You're on a new educational journey this year, doing traditional homeschooling. And I know it'll be amazing for you. And just thank you for your continued advocacy for Wisconsin families and families all over the country. And everyone, like Ty's just an email, a text message away. So if he's here, he's offering to be a resource to you, and take him up on the offer. So thank you, Ty.
And thank you, Tilly.
This is it for the Parent Exchange this week, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Bye, Ty.
Bye-bye.